It's been a day of firsts in the war with Iran. The first enemy ship sunk by a U.S. torpedo since World War II. The first F-15s shot down by other aircraft. The first NATO territory targeted by Iran. And the names of the first U.S. fallen just released publicly. In fact, that's where we're going to start. On the screen here, left to right, is Sergeant Declan Cody of West Des Moines, Iowa. Captain Cody Khork of Winter Haven, Florida. Sergeant First Class Nicole Amor of White Bear Lake, Minnesota. And Sergeant First Class Noah Tietjens of Bellevue, Nebraska. The Pentagon added that all four were killed during an Iranian drone strike in Kuwait on March 1st, 2026, adding that they were assigned to the 103rd Sustainment Command based out of Des Moines, Iowa. Now, personally, I, for one, am grateful for their selfless service and sacrifice for our nation, and I'm thinking of their families and loved ones right now as they have to process this tragic loss. And we should note that both President Trump and General Kane mentioned in recent days that they do expect U.S. casualties to increase. And Secretary Rubio just yesterday said the most significant, intensive strikes of the war are still yet to come, hinting that they could be taking place in the coming days or even hours. Now, earlier today, Secretary Hegseth announced, quote, "Yesterday in the Indian Ocean, an American submarine sunk an Iranian warship that it thought was safe in international waters. This marks the first known attack by an American submarine on a surface ship since World War II. Here we have footage of the periscope from the strike showing the Iranian frigate Dina, D-E-N-A, off the coast of Sri Lanka being hit with what appears to be a Mark 48 torpedo and subsequently sinking. The War Zone, that does some incredible reporting, I'll link them in the description below. Be sure to give them a follow to keep up to date with all things military related. Said, quote, "This is the first known attack by an American submarine on a surface warship since World War II, and the first such action anywhere since the Churchill-class HMS Conqueror sank the Argentine Navy cruiser ARA General Belgrano during the Falklands War in 1982. Authorities in Sri Lanka had earlier announced that they had rescued Iranian sailors from the Iris Dina after what they said appeared to be a submarine attack. A Sri Lankan Navy source told Reuters, quote, "What we know at this point is 79 people were rescued and brought to the hospital, and one of them was seriously injured. Another 101 are believed to be missing, and the vessel has sunk." Now, to give you an idea of where this took place, because we are seeing in a number of different ways this war expanding. Iran here in the middle of the screen. If we move southeast a bit, Sri Lanka here off the coast of Iran. So zooming out a bit, you can see we're not just going after the Iranian Navy in the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea, but this one may have been the Arabian Sea, but even striking in international waters a good distance away from Iran. And this actually lines up with what General Kane said in his briefing this morning. Quote, "We've destroyed more than 20 Iranian naval vessels, including, in addition to the frigate by the submarine." He said, "We've effectively neutralized at this point Iran's major naval presence in theater." And that lines up with a lot of the strike footage we've seen in recent days. The opening 1, 2, 3 days of this war was a lot of missile launchers and air defense sites. The Pentagon in recent days has released more and more footage showing effective strikes against the Iranian Navy. And this lines up with recent statements from the White House kind of outlining the key objectives for this war. Now, this is something I criticized early on, as I did not think this was clearly articulated, and it was not uniform. We were hearing kind of different justifications for war depending on who you talk to. It seems like that's changed in the last 24 hours, and we're seeing numerous government officials citing these 4 reasons. So the White House says the objectives of Operation Epic Fury is 1, destroy the Iranian regime's missiles; 2, annihilate their navy; 3, ensure their terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the world; and 4, ensure Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. Now, this is something we talked about in the lead up to the war about what can and cannot be achieved via air power alone. I would argue that the only one on that list that we can definitively check off without putting boots on the ground is the annihilation of their navy. When you're talking about the destruction of the missile and the missile program start to finish to include production facilities, very challenging with just air power. Terrorist proxy networks is a series of relationships across the entire Middle East. We can't bomb relationships away. And then the nuclear program, based off what we saw during Operation Midnight Hammer, likely is going to take more than just big bombs falling from B-2 bombers to eliminate not just the facilities, but the knowledge base that brought that program around in the first place. Nonetheless, we do have what appears to be a clear set of objectives that we can now point to and measure operations off of going forward. Now, sticking with the naval aspect here, President Trump yesterday with some pretty interesting news suggesting the U.S. Navy might start escorting tankers through the Straits of Hormuz. Now, this follows the senior advisor to the IRGC's commander-in-chief yesterday saying, quote, "The strait is closed, and whoever wants to cross, our heroes in the Navy of the IRGC and the Army will set those ships on fire." I'm going to go back to the map to show you the specific area we're talking about here and the challenges involved with this. So the Strait of Hormuz, we've got Iran here on the top part of the screen. The Strait of Hormuz is this little turn. So you see how ships coming through here will have to slow down. Big tankers coming through the Gulf have to slow down. It's a very narrow area they have to pass through. For reference, we'll do a little from one end to the other. At its narrowest point here, I guess that's not even the narrowest. The narrowest point here, well, that area, oh, we're all over the place. The narrowest point here, we're looking at 41 miles, 60 kilometers. So a lot of Iranian munitions can reach within that and strike these boats. But President Trump yesterday, in a Truth Social post, offered the possibility of naval assistance and called upon the U.S. Development Finance Corporation to provide risk insurance that would guarantee the financial security of maritime trade operating near the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. They say after the U.S. military struck Iran on February 28th, maritime traffic in the Strait dropped 70%, according to Marine Traffic, a ship tracking service. So we don't know yet if the U.S. Navy is going to take on this mission, but one of the challenges is we no doubt have seen, if not the complete, very near the complete destruction of the Iranian Navy. But we have seen in the war in Ukraine that you don't necessarily have to have a Navy to shut off waterways. So we don't know about Iran has no doubt a significant fleet of, I wouldn't call them unmanned surface vessels, but kind of small fast boats that wouldn't necessarily make their way. You wouldn't call them like a large naval vessel, but they could harass, interdict, and cause damage to, civilian vessels. And then, of course, there's the drone threat. Drones from across Iran could strike these vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz. So the U.S. Navy's job there might be very similar to what we saw off the coast of Yemen about a year ago, out there just trying to intercept inbound munitions. Now, a challenge with that is even if the United States is effective in shooting down every single one of those and not a single Iranian drone gets through, that risk actually carries over to the insurance providers and the carriers. They might not want to take the risk, even if the United States is saying, we have our ships here working to shoot down the munitions. That's, again, very similar to what we saw in the slowdown in the Red Sea about a year ago. Now, another first here, we got news overnight that it may have been Kuwaiti F-18s that shot down the first F-15s ever brought down by other aircraft in combat operations. Of course, in this case, it appears to be friendly fire. The Wall Street Journal reported that a Kuwaiti jet fighter was the cause of the accidental shoot down of 3 American F-15s on Sunday, according to people familiar with the initial reports of the incident. They say one Kuwaiti F-A-18 pilot launched 3 missiles against the U.S. aircraft. All 3 U.S. aircraft went down, but their pilots and backseaters ejected safely. They say the incident occurred soon after an Iranian drone penetrated Kuwaiti air defenses and struck a tactical operations center in a commercial port, killing 6 U.S. troops. They say Kuwaiti forces were on edge when the radars detected the American jets flying in and fired on them. F-15, a warplane that has been flying since the 1970s, has never been shot down by an enemy aircraft in aerial combat. The F-15 boasts a 104-0 record against enemy planes. They mark that the newer F-15 jets cost about $100 million apiece. So pretty wild there. No doubt more information forthcoming. We should be able to differentiate there. The Kuwaitis should know that those are American aircraft. Understandable that they're on edge, but there are a lot of mechanisms in place to make sure that type of thing doesn't happen. So the investigation here, no doubt, will be interesting. There have been additional rumors of more shootdowns across the Gulf at this point. Yesterday, there was a lot coming out that additional F-15s may have been shot down by Iran over Iranian airspace. I've not seen any evidence of that. So just speculation, no evidence of footage of anything getting shot down, no wreckage, anything like that. But again, as air operations pick up here in the coming days, that's something that is increasingly likely. I mean, We're going to get into this in a second here. In fact, Secretary Hegseth just earlier today said that we have, quote, uncontested and complete control of the Iranian airspace. And like, the airspace might be open, but I don't think that at this point we should assume that Iran has zero air defense capabilities, right? So whether that means they are 80% degraded, 90% degraded, 99% degraded, there should be no assumption that Iran does not have any ability at all to fire on aircraft overhead. Now, that might only be useful against drones and maybe can only reach a certain altitude, but either way, what I'm trying to stress is our pilots moving into Iranian airspace now are still at a significant risk. In fact, with that, General Kane in the briefing earlier today said that with the addition, kind of the clearance of this airspace over Iran, he said, quote, CENTCOM is moving from standoff munitions into stand-in precision strikes overhead Iran. This is something we've talked about in recent videos where we said the initial waves of the attack were largely carried out with standoff munitions, long-range precision munitions that did not put U.S. pilots at risk of being shot down. Those were mostly going after air defense assets, clearing the space, so now we can put aircraft overhead, dropping more and less expensive munitions at a greater pace. So Tomahawks, very expensive. We don't have a ton of those, especially compared to things like regular bombs with guidance kits. So you're going to see a lot more, it sounds like, a lot more manned aircraft over the skies of Iran in coming days, and there's a lot of targets still to be hit. All right, so we know that missile launches, according to General Kane earlier today, missile launches out of Iran are down 86% since the opening days of the fighting, and drone launches are down 73%. And we've got constant footage coming out of Israel and the United States showing strike after strike after strike on missile launch platforms, drones getting ready to launch, and so on. But Iran is still losing munitions. There are still a lot of targets in a military sense that need to be engaged if we actually are trying, or if we plan to degrade their launch capabilities. Just a few moments ago, Iran released their most recent videos saying this is their 17th wave of attacks, ballistic missile and drone launches being carried out against a variety of targets all across the Middle East. So while the airspace appears to be open at this point, the strikes are likely to increase in intensity, and that's probably what Secretary Rubio was talking about yesterday. Now, we're talking about the scope and the kind of the extension of this war across the region, and another first, NATO territory was directly targeted by Iran a few hours ago. The Turkish Ministry of Defense said, quote, a ballistic missile that was detected heading towards Turkish airspace after being launched from Iran and passing through Iraqi and Saudi airspace was successfully engaged and neutralized in time by NATO air and missile defense systems deployed in the eastern Mediterranean. Back to the map here for a little context. Iran, middle of the screen. Turkey's going to be up here to the north, in and out. Turkey's up here to the northwest. According to Michael Weiss, he says, U.S. military sources tells me regarding the Iranian missile strike on Turkey, it was launched around 11:40 p.m. Eastern at Incirlik Air Base. A U.S. Navy ship in the Mediterranean shot it down with an SM-3. So you're talking about Iran here in the middle of the screen, launching a missile at Turkey. Incirlik, I believe, is in this little area here. So as it crossed over Iraq, crossed over Syria, in the Mediterranean, a U.S. Navy ship shot it down. Now, addressing this earlier today, Secretary Hegseth at the press conference was asked, is this Article 5 type stuff? And he said his direct quote was, no. There's no sense that Turkey bringing this down, and it looks like it might have been the U.S., again, shooting it down, would trigger Article 5. Notable that is now in the conversation, though. And this one will get a little bit confusing, I'm sure. Yes, technically, this could be viewed as an Article 5 event where Turkey or anybody could bring this to the North Atlantic Council and say, we'd like a vote on invoking Article 5, and all 32 member states could vote, and technically they could vote yes, and they all could commit military resources to going after Iran. Technically, that falls within the realm of possibility. Realistically, it's not going to happen for a couple different reasons. First off, Turkey's probably not going to invoke it in the first place. They almost certainly wouldn't even vote for it. All right, Turkey's not interested right now in offensive military operations against Iran. They've condemned U.S. strikes in Iran at this point. In fact, Iran going after Turkey shows just another level of desperation that we are seeing from the regime right now. Again, trying to spread chaos across the entire region. Until just earlier today, Turkey had been exempt. And like the one country that had not yet been targeted. That changed. Again, shows the level of Iranian desperation. Turkey would not vote yes in an Article 5 invocation against Iran. So it's kind of a moot point. But yes, technically, that could be something that would be triggered. So again, I think the more important thing there is not the Article 5 invocation that will not happen, but instead that Iran is looking increasingly desperate. They're down. They're not out. But the expansion of target sets into Turkey is pretty telling at this point. Again, there's a lot happening. Trying to keep y'all up to date with the little bits as they come out. Working on another video for later today talking about what might be some U.S. strategy mid to long term in Iran. Going to try to split those out a little bit. I don't know if that's better or worse, but it's what we're going to try for now. Anyways, that's all we got. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.